The afternoon light streamed through the enormous windows of the mansion, like golden rays that turned the floating dust into tiny constellations. Elena Morales, 32 years old, impeccable navy blue uniform and hair pulled back in a practical braid, placed her earbuds with the familiarity of someone executing a sacred ritual. Music filled her ears, a traditional song from her village with guitars and accordions that reminded her of the festivals in the central plaza when she was a child and life seemed simpler. No one was home. The contract specified it clearly. On Wednesdays, Mr. Adrian Mendoza traveled to business meetings in the capital. The house had to shine like a mirror before his return. Elena knew every corner of that three-story property, every Italian marble, every crystal chandelier that cost more than her entire year's salary. She had cleaned enough mansions to know that big houses are always empty, even when there are people inside. She started with the main hall, that intimidating space with 6-meter-high ceilings and a grand piano that no one played. As she wiped the surfaces, her hips began to move to the rhythm of the music. A step to the left, smooth turn, another step to the right. It was a dance she carried in her blood, taught by her grandmother on hot afternoons when work in the fields ended and life was celebrated simply because it had to be celebrated. Elena smiled to herself, lost in that moment of stolen freedom. Her arms extended gracefully as she cleaned, transforming a mundane task into a dance. The cloth became her partner, the polished surfaces a stage. For a few minutes, she wasn't just Elena the cleaner, but Elena who danced as she did at village festivals, when young people formed circles and the music lasted until dawn. What she didn't know was that from the second floor, leaning against the mahogany wood railing, Adrian Mendoza was watching her with an expression he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine amazement. He had cancelled his trip at the last minute. An important negotiation had been postponed, and instead of informing the cleaning company of the change in plans, he simply returned home. When he heard muted music coming from the lower floor, he descended silently, expecting to find he didn't know what. But he certainly didn't expect to find this. The woman who cleaned his house every Wednesday, whom he had barely noticed in the last 6 months beyond a polite greeting and a generous tip, moved with a grace that seemed both ancient and new. She wasn't a professional dancer. That was evident in the free, unpretentious way of her movements. It was something more authentic. It was someone dancing because her body needed to express something that words couldn't. Adrian was 38 years old and had built a real estate empire from scratch. He had negotiated with the most powerful men in the country, had signed contracts for millions, had been photographed in society pages next to his fiancée, Victoria Santillana, heiress to one of the region's most traditional families. He had experienced success in all its tangible forms, but how long had it been since he experienced something that simply made him feel? The song ended. Elena stopped, breathing slightly labored, and removed one earbud to listen for any unusual noise in the house. The silence reassured her. She continued cleaning, moving toward the next room. Adrian remained motionless, processing what he had just witnessed. Something in that scene had removed layers of indifference he had accumulated without realizing it. Perhaps it was the pure honesty of the moment, the way she danced without an audience, without seeking approval, simply existing in an instant of private joy. Or perhaps it was the brutal contrast with his own life. Gala dinners where every conversation was calculated, smiles that were professional masks, a fiancée whose caresses were as cold as her father's business negotiations. He made an impulsive decision. He descended the stairs deliberately, noisily, clearing his throat to announce his presence. Elena froze. The earbuds hung around her neck, the music still playing faintly. Her face paled and then flushed intensely. She had been caught doing something unforgivable, behaving as if the house were hers, as if she had the right to enjoy herself while working. "Mr. Mendoza," she stammered, quickly storing the earbuds in her uniform pocket. "I didn't know you were home. The contract says that on Wednesdays." "I know," he interrupted softly, raising a hand to calm her. "I changed my plans. It's not your fault." The silence stretched between them, heavy and strange. Elena wanted to disappear, to melt into the marble floors she had polished until they were perfect. In her 6 years working in luxury mansions, she had never made a mistake like this. The music, the dancing, the carefreeness, it was all unacceptable. The rich didn't hire people to enjoy themselves in their homes. They hired them to be invisible, to erase disorder without leaving a trace of their own humanity. But Adrian didn't seem upset. In fact, there was something different in his expression, something she couldn't fully identify because she had never seen it in the faces of her employers. Genuine curiosity. "What music were you listening to?" he asked, and the tone of his voice wasn't that of a boss inspecting an employee, but of someone who genuinely wanted to know. Eleanor blinked, disconcerted. "Excuse me?" "The music," repeated Adrian, approaching a step. "It seemed joyful, different from what I normally hear." She looked at her shoes, those practical, worn shoes that contrasted with the Italian leather loafers he wore. "It's traditional music," she murmured. "From my village, to the north in the mountains, we play it at celebrations." "And the dance?" he asked, and this time there was something almost vulnerable in his voice. "Is that traditional too?" Elena nodded, not daring to look at him directly. "My grandmother taught me. She said that dancing was the way our people told stories before words existed. Each movement means something. The earth, the harvest, love, loss." Adrian remained silent for a long moment. Then, in an act that even he couldn't fully explain, he extended his hand. "Could you teach me?" Eleanor looked up sharply, her dark eyes meeting his for the first time, really. She saw something there she didn't expect. Loneliness. This man who had everything was asking for something so simple, so human, that for a moment the barriers between their worlds felt less solid. "Sir, It wouldn't be appropriate," she began. "Adrian," he corrected gently. "And maybe it's not appropriate, but today I cancelled important meetings and came home without knowing why. Now I think I know. Teach me to dance the way you danced when you thought you were alone." Eleanor felt something stir in her chest. A small voice warned her about the dangers, about lines that shouldn't be crossed. But there was another voice, older and wiser, that reminded her of her grandmother's words. "Dancing is a gift, Mijita. Don't keep it just for yourself." Slowly, hesitantly, she placed her earbuds in his ears and pressed play. And so it all began. In a hall bathed in golden afternoon light, a cleaner taught a millionaire the steps of a dance her grandmother had taught her in a dusty village square, while traditional music filled the space between two worlds that should never have met, but that in that moment touched each other with a softness neither would forget. Wednesdays became something different. Elena arrived at 2 o'clock sharp, as always. She signed in at the cleaning company's register, prepared her supplies, and began her meticulous routine. But now, every time she turned a corner or entered a room, there was an anticipation in her chest that hadn't existed before. Because now she knew he might be there, and he always was. The second time was accidental, or at least it seemed so. Adrian emerged from his study with a cup of coffee, feigning surprise at finding her cleaning the second-floor corridor. They exchanged polite greetings, words about the weather, nothing important. But when he asked if she had heard more music from her village, something changed. Eleanor, normally reserved to the point of invisibility, began to talk. She told him about the harvest festival, when the whole village gathered to celebrate the crop. She described how the women wore hand-embroidered dresses that had been passed down for generations, how the men played guitars and accordions until their fingers bled, how the children ran between tables loaded with shared food, where no one asked who had brought what, because everything belonged to everyone. Adrian listened like a thirsty man drinking fresh water. His world was full of words, contracts, negotiations, calculated promises, but it had been long since he heard someone simply sharing something true without expecting anything in return. The third time he prepared 2 cups of coffee. He offered one to Elena with an almost shy smile, something that contradicted his impeccable appearance in a designer suit. She hesitated, her hands still with cleaning gloves, but finally accepted. They sat in the kitchen, she on one of the high stools, he leaning against the granite counter, and talked for half an hour. He asked her about her family. Elena shared fragments. She had a younger sister, Mariana, 28 years old, more ambitious and impatient with life than Elena had ever been. Her father, Don Carlos, 68 years old, had been a farmer all his life, a man of old values who believed in honest work and keeping your head down. Her mother had died 10 years ago from an illness that advanced too quickly in a body that had worked too hard. "And you?" asked Elena, surprising herself with her audacity. "Do you have family, Mr. Mendoza?" "Adrian," he reminded her again. "And yes, I have family. Too much, some would say." He told her about the obligatory Sundays at his future mother-in-law's house, Doña Beatriz Santillana, a 64-year-old matriarch who ruled her family and social connections with an iron fist. He described the endless dinners, where every conversation was a social minefield, where every word was weighed and measured to impress or intimidate. "And your fiancée?" Elena asked softly, aware she was crossing a line. Adrian's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Victoria is suitable. Our families have been connected for years. The marriage makes sense from a business and social perspective. But do you love her?" The words came out before Elena could stop them. She covered her mouth with her hand, horrified by her boldness. "Sorry, sir, I shouldn't have—" "No," he interrupted, and his voice sounded tired in a way words couldn't fully express. "She doesn't love me and I don't love her, but love is a luxury that people like us, like me, can't always afford." Elena looked at him directly then, those dark eyes full of something he hadn't seen in a long time, compassion without pity. "With all due respect, Mr. Adrian, you have enough money to buy yourself any luxury in the world. If you can't afford love, it's because you're choosing not to." The words fell between them like stones in a pond, creating ripples that expanded in silence. Adrian should have felt offended by an employee's frankness. He should have reminded her of her place, re-established professional boundaries. But instead, something in his chest loosened, as if someone had untied a knot that had been tightening for years. "You're right," he finally admitted. "Completely right." It was in the 4th week when things changed again. Elena arrived to find Adrian waiting for her in the main hall, with her earbuds in his hand, the ones she had forgotten the week before. "You left these here," he said, extending them toward her. "But before I return them, I need to confess something. I listened to your entire playlist 3 times. Elena felt heat rising to her cheeks. "Really?" "Really," he confirmed, and there was a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. "And I decided I need to learn more about these songs. So I thought, maybe you could teach me, properly this time, not just the steps, but the stories behind them." Elena should have said no. She should have remembered her sister Mariana's warnings about rich men who play with working women's emotions. She should have thought about her father and what he would say if he knew his daughter was spending time with an engaged, rich man completely out of her reach. But when Adrian smiled, a real smile, not the professional smile he probably used in business meetings, Elena felt something inside her surrender. "Okay," she said softly, "but only on Wednesdays, and only because it's part of my culture and I believe everyone should know their roots." "Only on Wednesdays," he agreed, though they both knew it was a benevolent lie. It was no longer just about dance lessons or casual conversations. Something deeper was taking shape, something neither was ready to name, but both felt growing with each encounter. Over the following weeks, Elena taught him not just to dance but to understand. She explained how each movement represented elements of life in the mountains, the gentle turn like wind through pine trees, the firm steps like earth beneath feet, extended arms like condor wings flying over deep valleys. Adrian learned with a dedication that surprised them both. This man who directed million-dollar meetings and commanded the respect of powerful businessmen stumbled over his own feet while trying to follow traditional rhythms, laughing at himself in a way he probably hadn't since childhood. "I'm terrible," he admitted, after stepping on her foot for the 3rd time. "You're not terrible," Elena corrected, smiling despite herself. "You're just used to controlling everything. Dancing requires surrendering to the rhythm, trusting that your body knows more than your mind thinks." "Like life," he murmured. "Like life," she confirmed. It was in those moments, when music filled the empty hall and 2 people from completely different worlds moved clumsily but sincerely to a shared rhythm, that both began to realize something terrifying. This space between them, This Wednesday, stolen from the rest of the world, was becoming the only place where either of them felt genuinely alive. On the fifth Wednesday, Eleanor brought something special: homemade bread wrapped in an embroidered kitchen cloth. "My father baked this morning," she explained almost shyly. "It's an old family recipe. I thought, well, you always prepare coffee for our conversations, so I wanted to contribute something too." Adrian took the bread with a reverence that seemed disproportionate for a simple gift. He unwrapped it slowly, as if it were something precious. The aroma of freshly baked dough filled the modern, immaculate kitchen, a smell that seemed out of place among the stainless steel appliances and marble surfaces. "It's been years since anyone gave me something handmade," he said, and there was an emotion in his voice that made Elena look away, uncomfortable with the intensity of the moment. "Everything I receive are expensive gifts from exclusive catalogues, things chosen by personal assistants based on what's appropriate for my position." They shared the bread with coffee, sitting not in the formal dining room with its table for 12, but at the small kitchen table where Adrian had probably never eaten before. It was a space that seemed forgotten in the house, a cozy corner that contrasted with the grandeur of the rest of the mansion. "Tell me about your fiancé," Eleanor said suddenly, surprising herself for the third time since she had really met this man. Not the social details that appear in magazines, but who she really is. Adrian chewed slowly, considering the question. "Victoria Santillana is 35 years old, beautiful by any conventional standard, educated at the best schools in Europe, fluent in 4 languages. She knows exactly what to say in every social situation, what dress to wear for each occasion, how to navigate the complexities of high society with the precision of a general planning a battle." "That's a resume," Elena observed softly. "Not who she is." Adrian sighed. "Victoria is cold, not cruel but cold, efficient. Our conversations are transactional: what event we'll attend next weekend, which family members need to be pleased, what investments require our joint attention. We've been engaged for 6 years, and I can't remember the last time we had a real conversation. One where we shared something true." "Why stay with her then?" "Because it's what's expected," he responded, and the resignation in his voice was sadder than any intense emotion. "My father built this empire from scratch, worked until his health collapsed to give me opportunities he never had. He died 5 years ago expecting me to consolidate our place in society. Marrying Victoria fulfills that promise. The Mendoza and Santillana families united represent a merger of new money and old lineage. It's perfect on paper." "But terrible in reality," Elena finished. "But terrible in reality," he agreed. Elena broke off another piece of bread, thoughtful. "Can I share something about my family?" "Please." "My mother worked all her life as a domestic employee like me. She cleaned houses during the day and washed clothes at night to earn extra money. She died young, exhausted, with cracked hands and a permanently bent back. But there was something in her that never broke, her joy. She sang while she worked, found beauty in the smallest things: a bird at the window, the smell of coffee in the morning, her daughter's laughter. At her funeral, her sister told me something I never forgot. Your mother was rich in the only things that matter: love, family, moments of genuine happiness. The rest is just noise." Adrian looked at her intently. "Do you believe that? That money is just noise?" "No," Eleanor answered honestly. "Money matters. When my father got sick last year and we couldn't pay for his full medications, money mattered a lot. When my sister had to leave university because we couldn't cover tuition, money mattered. I'm not naive enough to romanticize poverty, but I believe there's something worse than not having money, having everything and feeling empty anyway." The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people recognizing a shared truth that had remained unspoken for too long. "Are you happy, Elena?" Adrian finally asked, using her name with a familiarity that now felt natural. She considered the question carefully. "I'm happy in moments. When I dance, when I cook with my father, when Mariana tells me her dreams of traveling the world. I can't afford to be happy all the time. Constant happiness is another luxury, but I treasure the moments when it comes. Like these Wednesdays." She stopped abruptly, realizing what she had admitted. Like these Wednesdays, Adrian repeated softly, and the way he said it turned the phrase into something more than words. In that moment, both knew they had crossed an invisible threshold. They were no longer simply an employer and an employee sharing polite conversations. They had become something more complicated. Two people who truly saw each other, who shared truths they shared with no one else, who looked forward to Wednesdays with an anticipation neither dared examine too closely. "I should continue with my work," Elena finally said, standing up with a reluctance they both felt. "Yes," Adrian agreed, but neither moved immediately. "Mr. Mendoza, Adrian," she corrected herself, "these Wednesdays, they're important to me too. But I need you to understand something. I can't be someone who breaks up families or interferes with engagements. I'm not that person." "I know," he said, "and I wouldn't ask you to be. But could this be just this? Can we have these Wednesdays where we're just two people sharing bread and coffee and honest conversations, without expectations beyond that?" It was a lie, and they both knew it. There were already expectations, hopes neither wanted to admit, but it was a necessary lie, a fiction that allowed them to continue meeting without confronting the growing truth of what this really meant. "Only on Wednesdays," Elena agreed, repeating the promise she had already broken in 100 small ways. "Only on Wednesdays," Adrian lied, knowing he thought about her far beyond that single day of the week. As Elena continued with her work, cleaning surfaces that already shone and organizing spaces that were already perfectly ordered, Adrian remained in the kitchen with the half-eaten bread in front of him. He touched the embroidered cloth with reverence, tracing the patterns with his fingers. It was simple, wildflowers stitched by hands that had known hard work, but it was more valuable to him than any possession in his house full of luxuries. For the first time in years, Adrian Mendoza understood the difference between price and value, and that understanding terrified him because it meant he would have to confront everything he had built his life around and ask himself if any of it was really worthwhile. The 8th Wednesday brought dark clouds both literally and figuratively. Eleanor arrived 15 minutes late, something that had never happened before. Her uniform was perfectly pressed as always, but there was something in her eyes, a tension, a worry, that Adrian noticed immediately. "Are you okay?" he asked, abandoning any pretense of casualness. "Yes, no, it's complicated," Elena let out a long sigh. "My sister, Mariana, she found out about our Wednesdays." Adrian's heart sank. "How?" "One of her friends works at another property of your company. She saw your car here the last few Wednesdays when it wasn't supposed to be. Gossip travels fast in our community. Mariana confronted me last night." Elena moved toward the kitchen, needing to do something with her hands. She began preparing coffee automatically, the familiar routine providing an anchor. What did she say? Adrian remained in the doorway, giving her space but needing to know. "That I'm a fool," the words came out bitterly. "That rich men don't fall in love with cleaners, they just play with them and then return to their appropriate lives. That I'm being used and I'm too naive to see it." "That's not," Adrian began. "Not what?" Eleanor turned to him, and there was a fierceness in her gaze he had never seen. "Not true? Aren't you engaged to a beautiful woman from your same social class? Don't you have a planned wedding? Don't you return every night to that life while I go back to my small apartment in a neighborhood you would probably never visit?" "All of that is true," Adrian admitted slowly. "But what Mariana doesn't know, what no one can see, is that these Wednesdays are the only real thing in my life. I'm not playing with you, Elena. I'm desperately trying to remember what it feels like to be human." Elena closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "But Mariana said something else, something that kept me awake all night. She worked 3 years ago at another of your properties, a country house you rarely use. She said you're known in our community as a good employer, generous, fair. But she also said you've always been impeccably professional, distant. That the Adrian Mendoza she knows would never cross lines with an employee, would never risk his reputation that way. What she asked me was, if your behavior with me is so out of character, does it mean you really feel something? Or am I just a temporary distraction from a life you find boring?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and inevitable. Adrian approached slowly, measuring each step. He stopped at a respectful distance, but closer than they had been before. "I want to tell you something I've never shared with anyone," he began, his voice low but clear. "My mother, Isabel, came from a background similar to yours. She was a teacher at a public school in a small town when she met my father. He had just started his business, had ambitions but little money yet. They fell genuinely in love, built something together. But when my father began to have real success, when money started flowing and the doors of high society opened, my mother changed. Or perhaps she was forced to change. She left her teaching job, adopted society manners, became the wife she was expected to be, and something in her died in the process." Elena listened with total attention. "She died when I was 23, Adrian continued, and his voice cracked slightly. "Sudden, aggressive illness. In her last days, when the pain was too strong to pretend, she asked me to come close. She told me, 'Adrian, promise me something. Don't let money turn you into someone you wouldn't recognize. Your father did it with the best intentions, but I lost myself in the process. Don't make the same mistake. When you find something real, someone who makes you feel alive, don't sacrifice it for what others expect.'" A tear rolled down Elena's cheek. "And the night before she died, she left a letter for me." Adrian swallowed hard. "My father kept it in a safety deposit box with instructions that I should only open it when I found my true north. I've never opened it because I never knew what that meant. Until now." The air between them vibrated with unspoken emotions. "Eleanor," Adrian said, and never before had her name sounded so important. "I can't promise this will be easy or that I have all the answers. My life is complicated in ways I can't even fully explain. But what I can promise you is this. You're not a distraction. You're an awakening. And whatever that means, I need time to figure it out." Eleanor looked at him for a long moment, searching for falsehood, finding only honest vulnerability. "Mariana also warned me about something else," she finally said. "That if I continue with this, if I allow whatever is growing between us to keep developing, when it inevitably ends, it will break me in ways I'll never recover from." "She's right," Adrian admitted. "Your sister is wiser than I am." "Probably," Elena agreed, and for the first time that afternoon a small smile touched her lips. "But some things are worth the risk, aren't they? My mother used to say that living without risks is just another way of not living at all." Wise woman, your mother. She was. Elena made a decision she could see forming behind her eyes. "Okay, we'll continue with our Wednesdays, but I need you to understand something. I'm not a naive romantic. I know exactly where we stand. You in your world, me in mine, with a chasm between us that probably will never close. But I also know that these moments, these conversations, this space where it's just us, it's more authentic than anything I have in my usual life. So yes, I'll take the risk. But in return, I need you to be completely honest with me. Always." "Always," Adrian promised, and it was a promise that meant more than any business contract he had signed. They spent the rest of the afternoon in contemplative silence. Elena cleaned, Adrian worked on his laptop, but there was a mutual awareness that filled the spaces between them. Occasionally their eyes met, and they exchanged small conspiratorial smiles that spoke of shared secrets. When it was time for Elena to leave, Adrian walked her to the door, something he had never done before. "Elena," he called when she was already at the threshold, "your sister is wrong about something." "What?" "Rich men do fall in love with cleaners. At least this one is." The words hung in the air as Elena walked away, her heart pounding against her ribs with a mixture of euphoria and terror, because now they couldn't pretend this was simply friendship or innocent companionship. It had been named, put into words, made real in a way that couldn't be undone. And somewhere in the city, in a luxurious downtown office, Victoria Santillana looked at her calendar and noticed that every Wednesday for the last 2 months, Adrian had been indisposed or working from home. She didn't suspect romance. That was too far beneath her radar. But she suspected something, and Victoria, raised in a family where information was power, decided it was time to investigate. The storm was forming, but for now, in the quiet after the confession, Adrian and Elena had one more moment of peace before everything changed. The 9th Wednesday began normally. Too normally. Elena arrived at the exact time, prepared her cleaning equipment, and began her routine. But Adrian noticed something different about her, a tension in her shoulders, a way she avoided his gaze directly. It wasn't until the 3rd hour that she finally spoke. "The cleaning company is reorganizing routes," she said, while polishing the staircase railing, her voice carefully neutral. "Starting next month, I'll be assigned to the south sector of the city. I won't be coming on Wednesdays anymore, or to this house at all." Adrian felt as if the floor tilted beneath his feet. "What? Why?" "Company expansion, personnel redistribution. It's normal," Elena continued cleaning with mechanical movements. "My supervisor said I'm one of her best workers, so they're assigning me a larger route. It's good for my career. More houses mean more tips, more stability." "I can talk to the owner of the company," Adrian said quickly. "I can specifically request that you continue with this property." "No," Elena responded firmly, finally looking at him. "That would only generate questions, rumors. There are already enough as things are, thanks to Mariana's meddling friends. If you intervene specifically, it would confirm all the speculation." Adrian ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "So what do we do?" Elena put down the cleaning cloth and sat on one of the steps, a position that in any other context would be unthinkable. An employee sitting down at work, taking liberties. But they were no longer just employer and employee, and both knew it. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me thinks maybe it's a sign that the universe is saying this, whatever this is, has gone too far, and it's time to step back before someone really gets hurt." Adrian sat on the step below hers, a position that put them almost at the same height. "And the other part?" "The other part," Elena closed her eyes, "wants to do something completely out of character, something dishonest." "What?" She took a deep breath before continuing. "I could not tell the company about the change. I could keep coming here on my days off, clean the house anyway without charging, just to preserve these Wednesdays." Adrian looked at her with astonishment. "You would work for free?" "Elena, no, I can't allow—" "You're not allowing anything," she interrupted with a fierceness that contrasted with her usual soft tone. "It would be my choice, my foolish, impulsive, completely irrational decision that I'll probably regret, but that I need to make anyway because the idea of not having these Wednesdays, of not having these conversations, of never seeing you again." She stopped abruptly, realizing what she had said. The silence that followed was charged, electric. "Never seeing me again," Adrian repeated softly. Elena stood up abruptly, needing movement, distance. "This is exactly what Mariana warned about. I'm becoming dependent on something I can't have. I'm making stupid choices based on feelings that shouldn't exist. I'm a cleaner, you're an engaged millionaire. This is destined to end in disaster. What if I weren't engaged?" The words fell like bombs. Elena turned slowly. "What?" Adrian stood too, closing the distance between them, but not touching her. "What if I ended the engagement with Victoria? Would that change anything?" "You can't do that," Elena whispered. "Your family, your social position, the expectations." "To hell with expectations." Adrian's voice was rough with contained emotion. "Elena, these last 2 months have been more alive, more real than the last 6 years of my life. Yes, ending things with Victoria will cause problems. Yes, there will be social and probably business consequences. But continuing with an engagement where we're both miserable just because it's convenient, that's cowardice. And I'm tired of being a coward." "But that doesn't solve the real problem." Elena shook her head. "Even without Victoria, we're still from completely different worlds. Your family would never accept me. Society—" "I'm not asking us to get married tomorrow," Adrian interrupted gently. "I'm saying I want the possibility. The chance to discover what this could be if we gave it space to grow without all these lies and limitations. But only if you want it too. Only if I'm not the only one who feels something extraordinary is happening here." Tears began to slide down Elena's cheeks. "Of course I feel it. I'm foolish enough to feel it so deeply it scares me. But Adrian, think about what you're suggesting. Ending a 6-year engagement, defying your family, risking your social position for a cleaner you met 2 months ago. For a woman, he corrected, who reminded me what it feels like to have real conversations, who shares bread made by her father and teaches traditional dances with the same grace others use to navigate luxury ballrooms, who is honest to the point of pain and who values moments over possessions. Yes, Elena, for that woman I would risk everything. Elena covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed. I need time to think, to talk to my father. Your father, Adrian suddenly remembered. You mentioned he's a traditional man. What would he think of all this? Elena lowered her hands, laughing bitterly. He'd probably have a heart attack. Don Carlos believes in honest work, in keeping your place, in not aspiring beyond your station. The idea of his daughter involved with a rich, engaged man, it would devastate him, especially after everything my mother endured working for rich people who treated her as invisible. I'm sorry, Adrian said sincerely. The last thing I want is to cause your family pain. I know. Eleanor wiped her tears with the back of her hand. That's why this is so difficult. You're not the rich villain in this story. You're just a good man in an impossible situation, and I'm just a woman who made the mistake of seeing beyond the uniform and the economic gap, of seeing the real person underneath. They looked at each other for a long moment, and in that silent space, both understood they had reached a turning point. They couldn't continue as they had been. These stolen Wednesdays, these conversations that danced around deeper feelings. Something had to change, take a definite direction, even if that meant risk. Next week, Elena finally said. By then I'll have talked to my father, processed all this, and you'll have had time to really think about what you're willing to sacrifice. Because words are easy, Adrian. It's when you have to face the real consequences that truth emerges. Next week, he agreed. That afternoon, Eleanor finished her work in contemplative silence. Adrian respected her space, but stayed close, aware this might be one of their last Wednesdays together this way, regardless of what they decided. When it was time to leave, Eleanor stopped at the door. Adrian, she said without turning around, just so you know, it's already too late not to get hurt. Regardless of what happens, I'm already too involved. So whatever decision you make it for the right reasons, not out of pity or guilt toward me. Never out of pity, he promised. You're many things, Elena Morales, but someone who inspires pity isn't one of them. Respect, admiration, something much deeper, but never pity. She finally turned, offered him a small, sad smile, and left into the darkening afternoon. Adrian remained in the doorway for a long time after she had gone, watching the clouds gathering on the horizon. A storm was approaching, both literal and metaphorical, and for the first time in his carefully controlled life, he wasn't sure he could control the outcome. But one thing was clear. He could no longer pretend these feelings didn't exist, that Elena was simply a pleasant acquaintance, that his current life was enough. Lines had been crossed, words had been spoken, and now he had to decide what kind of man he really was, one who followed the safe path laid out by others, or one who had the courage to build his own path, no matter the cost. Don Carlos Morales had been a farmer all his life. His hands, rough and marked by decades of work under the unforgiving sun, told stories of lost and won harvests, survived droughts, and humble celebrations. At 68 years old, his body was bent by hard work, but his spirit remained unshakable, anchored in principles he considered as solid as the mountains surrounding his native village. So when Elena sat before him in the small kitchen of the apartment they shared with Mariana, the words stuck in her throat like stones. How could she explain to a man who believed in clear boundaries and defined roles that his daughter had crossed every imaginable line? Papa, Elena began, her hands trembling around a cup of coffee, I need to talk to you about something important. Don Carlos looked up from the newspaper he was reading, his eyes the same dark color as Elena's, focusing on her with the complete attention he always gave when his daughters spoke. Are you in trouble, mija? Not in the way you think. Elena took a deep breath. But yes, I'm in a complicated situation. So for the next hour, Elena told everything. The Wednesdays, the conversations, the dancing, the shared bread, the feelings that had grown without permission. She omitted nothing important, knowing her father deserved the complete truth, no matter how difficult it was to say or hear. Don Carlos listened in silence, his expression moving from curiosity to concern and finally to something more complex, a mixture of fear, sadness, and something Elena couldn't fully identify. When she finished, the silence stretched long and heavy between them. "Your mother," he began, and his voice was hoarse with emotion, "was from a different family than mine. Her father owned the general store in the village. They had education, position. I was just a day laborer, the son of no one important. When I asked her to marry me, her family almost disowned her." Elena blinked in surprise. She had never heard this story. "What happened?" "She married me anyway," Don Carlos smiled sadly. "She said she preferred a hard life with someone who genuinely loved her than a comfortable life with someone chosen for convenience. And we had a hard life, Mija. She worked until her body gave out. She sacrificed comforts, education for her daughter's security, all because she chose love over practicality." "Do you regret it?" Elena whispered. "Every day," he admitted, and the brutal honesty of those words cut deep. "And at the same time, not a single day. That's the paradox of truly loving. You know you're choosing a difficult path, but you can't imagine not choosing it. Your mother died young, exhausted, with unfulfilled dreams, but she died loved, knowing her life meant something to the people who mattered most. So, you understand?" Don Carlos stood with difficulty, approaching the window overlooking the building's small courtyard. "I understand you've fallen in love with a man who lives in a different world. I understand he says he's willing to sacrifice things for you. But Mija, here's what you need to consider. Your mother chose poverty over comfort. Is this man willing to choose rejection from his class, loss of his position, criticism from his family? And are you willing to live with the guilt of being the reason he lost all that?" The questions hit Elena like punches. "I don't know," she admitted. "That's why I needed to talk to you. I needed wisdom from someone who has lived these consequences." Don Carlos turned to her, and there were tears in his tired eyes. "My wisdom is this: love isn't enough. I want it to be. I want to believe in those fairy tales where love conquers all. But real life is more complicated. Love needs foundations, mutual respect, shared values, the support of communities that hold you up when times get tough. Do you two have that? Or do you just have stolen Wednesdays and conversations in an empty house?" Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I don't know, Papa. I only know that when I'm with him I feel like I can breathe in a way I can't the rest of the week, as if for the first time in my adult life someone sees me. Not as the cleaner, not as the responsible daughter, not as the older sister, but as Elena. Just Elena. Is that enough reason to risk everything?" Don Carlos crossed the space between them and took his daughter's hands in his, those worked hands that had held his family together through unimaginable storms. "That's a question only you can answer, Mija. But before you do, I need you to consider something. If this man truly loves you, as he says, wouldn't you deserve more than secret Wednesdays? Wouldn't you deserve to be presented openly, to be part of his whole life, not just the stolen hours when no one is watching? True love doesn't hide. It presents itself, faces consequences, builds something that can stand in daylight." Her father's words resonated in Elena with the force of truth. She had been so focused on the beautiful moments with Adrian that she hadn't fully considered the bigger picture. Were they building something real, or just escaping their unsatisfying lives in each other's arms? "What should I do?" Elena asked, though she knew her father couldn't give her that answer. "Test him," Don Carlos finally said. "Give him time to show his true intentions. Words are cheap, Mija. Actions show real character. If he's willing to end his engagement, to face his family, to include you in his world, not hiding you, but presenting you, then maybe there's something real there. But if he keeps talking about changing without actually changing anything, then he's just a rich man playing with fantasies while keeping his real life intact." Elena hugged her father, this man who had sacrificed so much for her and Mariana. This man whose wisdom came from the kind of experiences no one chooses voluntarily, but everyone must eventually face. "Thank you, Papa." "Just promise me something," he said against her hair. "Don't lose yourself in this. Your mother, with all her sacrifices, never lost her essence. She was herself until the end, strong, joyful, authentic. If this man loves you, he must love you as you are, not as a version of you that fits his world. Do you understand me? Yes, Papa. That night, Elena lay awake in the small room she shared with Mariana, staring at the cracked ceiling and processing everything. Her sister slept soundly in the neighboring bed, probably oblivious to the emotional storms Elena was navigating. Her father's words had crystallized something. She needed to see actions, not just intentions. Adrian could talk all he wanted about ending his engagement, about facing his family, about building something real with her. But until he actually did it, until he took concrete steps in that direction, it was all just pretty words from a man trapped in difficult circumstances. And she also needed to be honest with herself. What was she willing to sacrifice? Because relationships worked both ways. If Adrian gave up his world for her, was she prepared for the weight of that responsibility? For the guilt when she saw him lose things he had worked his whole life to build? For the looks from his family, her community, all the people who knew her as Elena the cleaner, but who would see her as Elena the homewrecker, Elena the social climber, Elena who didn't know her place? Her phone vibrated on her nightstand. A message from Adrian. Elena looked at the message for a long time before responding. There was a long pause. Then, Elena's heart beat painfully in her chest. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of that moment. Tomorrow everything would change. The secret conversations, the stolen Wednesdays, the fantasies of possibility, all would become concrete reality with real consequences. Elena turned off her phone and curled up under the thin blankets, the weight of the future pressing against her chest. In less than 24 hours, Adrian Mendoza would face his fiancée, begin the process of untangling himself from a life he had planned for 6 years. And she would wait to see if the foundations they had built on Secret Wednesdays were strong enough to bear the weight of the real world. Outside, the storm finally arrived, rain beating against the windows like tears from the sky, and Elena fell asleep to the sound of distant thunder, not knowing if it was an omen or a catharsis, the end of something or the painful beginning of something new. Victoria Santillana was no fool. At 35 years old, she had navigated the most complex social circles with the precision of a surgeon, had handled family crises with the coldness of a general, and had kept her relationship with Adrian functioning smoothly precisely because she never confused romance with transaction. She knew exactly what their engagement was: a merger of fortunes, a consolidation of social positions, a mutually beneficial arrangement wrapped in the language of love to satisfy social expectations. So when Adrian asked to meet her at a neutral cafe instead of their usual residences, when she noticed the tension in his shoulders and the determination in his eyes, Victoria knew something had changed, and Victoria never entered situations without information. They sat at a private table in the back of an elegant establishment they frequented. Victoria ordered her usual tea with the efficiency of someone who had ordered at that place hundreds of times. Adrian ordered black coffee he probably wouldn't touch. "You're ending our engagement," Victoria said before he could speak, her voice as neutral as if she were commenting on the weather. Adrian blinked, surprised. "How?" "Please," Victoria stirred her tea with perfect movements. "I've known you for 6 years. I know every one of your expressions, every one of your tells. This is your difficult news face, the one you use when you have to fire employees or decline investment proposals. Besides, you've been working from home every Wednesday for 2 months. It took me 3 phone calls to discover that a particular cleaner has been spending considerable time at your mansion." Adrian stiffened. "It's not what you think." "Oh, I know exactly what it is." Victoria took a sip of her tea. "You fell in love. Of all the inconvenient and untimely things, you fell in love with someone real, someone who isn't part of our carefully constructed world." "I'm sorry," Adrian began. "Don't," Victoria interrupted, and for the first time something genuine broke through her perfect mask: weariness. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending remorse you don't feel. Let's end this cleanly, like adults who understand the situation." "You're not upset?" Victoria laughed, a sound without humor but not cruel. "They're upset because you're ending an engagement where neither of us was in love. Adrian, let me tell you something you probably don't know, because you never asked. I've been in a relationship with someone else for 3 years. My tennis instructor, Raphael, It's completely inappropriate. He comes from a humble background, and he's the only person in my life who treats me like Victoria, not like the Santillana heiress. So, no, I'm not upset you're choosing love over convenience. I'm surprised you had the courage to do it first. It was Adrian's turn to be speechless. You too? Yes, Victoria confirmed. So maybe we've both been living a lie, just playing roles others wrote for us. The difference is, you found the courage to do something about it. What will you do? Adrian asked, genuinely curious now. Probably cause the biggest scandal our society has seen in years, Victoria smiled, and there was something wild in that expression. My mother, the relentless Beatrice Santillana, is going to have an absolute meltdown. The families who have been counting on our merger are going to scramble. But you know what, Adrian, I'm tired. Tired of being the perfect daughter, the perfect fiancée, the perfect piece in someone else's chess game. If you can break free, maybe I can too. They looked at each other with a new understanding. These two strangers who had been engaged for 6 years without ever really knowing each other. I'm sorry, Adrian said again, but this time with different meaning. Sorry we never had this honest conversation, this real connection. Me too, Victoria admitted. But maybe we weren't meant for that. Maybe we were only supposed to be each other's catalyst, the necessary push to finally live authentically. They discussed practical details, how to announce the breakup, how to handle family questions, how to untangle the shared investments they had made in anticipation of marriage. Victoria was as efficient in ending the engagement as she had been in maintaining it. Can I give you advice? Victoria asked when they were about to leave. And please, the woman you chose, your special Wednesdays, she comes from a different world. Don't make the mistake our parents made with us. Don't try to turn her into someone who fits your world. If you truly love her, build a new world with her, one that honors where she comes from and where you want to go. Otherwise, you'll just repeat the same mistake we're correcting now. Unexpected wisdom, Adrian murmured. I'm more than just a pretty face and a prestigious surname. Victoria stood, smoothing her designer dress. I always was, just no one ever bothered to look beyond the surface, except Raphael, who sees me clean my own apartment in pajamas and still thinks I'm extraordinary. You sound happy. I'm terrified, Victoria corrected. But yes, underneath the terror, I think there's happiness waiting. For both of us. Just be careful, Adrian. The consequences of these choices will be harsher than you anticipate. When my mother finds out, when your social circle reacts, when businesses start feeling the pressure, it will be brutal. Are you prepared for that? No, Adrian admitted honestly. But I'm more prepared for that than for another decade living halfway, pretending this is enough when I know something more exists. Victoria extended her hand for a formal handshake, the gesture as precise as everything else about her. Then good luck, Adrian Mendoza. May you find with your cleaner what neither of us could find in these 6 years, something real. Same to you, Victoria, with Raphael. Oh, I will, she promised. Right after I survive the apocalypse my mother is about to unleash. They parted then, two people freeing themselves from a prison they had helped build but never really wanted. The cafe continued buzzing with activity around them, oblivious to the fact that one of the season's most anticipated engagements had just dissolved in civilized conversation and mutual relief. Adrian walked out into the bright afternoon, feeling as if he could breathe for the first time in years. He had taken the step, spoken the words, begun the process of untangling himself from a life that had never fit well. Now came the hard part, building something new with Elena, something that honored both their worlds without forcing either to give up who they were. His phone rang. A message from his lawyer. Doña Beatriz just called. She's demanding immediate meeting, says this is unacceptable and she has connections that can complicate your business if you proceed with the breakup. What do you want me to tell her? So it began. The threats, the pressures, the consequences he had anticipated, but now had to face in tangible reality. Doña Beatriz wasn't someone who accepted defeat gracefully. She was a woman who had built her social empire on control and fulfilled expectations. This breakup didn't just affect her daughter. It threatened the power structure she had spent decades building. Adrian responded, "Tell her I understand her position, but my decision is final. I'm willing to discuss the transition respectfully, but I'm not going to reverse course." As he drove back to his mansion, Adrian thought about the approaching Wednesday. Elena would be there waiting to hear how it all went, and for the first time since they met, he could tell her the complete truth without the shadow of his engagement hanging over them. But he also needed to be honest about what was coming. The social storm about to be unleashed, the business consequences already beginning to materialize, the pressure they would both face from all sides. Because one thing was saying he was willing to sacrifice for her, and quite another was living with those sacrifices day after day, month after month, when the real cost became visible. As he entered his mansion, the same mansion where everything had begun with a cleaner dancing carefreely to music he had never heard, Adrian wondered if the foundations they had built on secret Wednesdays would be strong enough for what was coming. Because Victoria was right. Being brave was easy in theory. It was when the real consequences hit, when you lost contracts and friendships and position, when you saw the cost in the faces of the people you loved, that you discovered what you were really made of. And now he and Elena were about to discover exactly that. The 10th Wednesday dawned with clear skies that seemed to mock the approaching storm. Elena arrived at the mansion with a mixture of anticipation and dread, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the door with the key Adrian had given her weeks ago, a gesture that at the time seemed small, but now symbolized the trust they had built. Adrian waited for her in the main hall, but something was different. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his suit, normally impeccable, was wrinkled, as if he had worn it for days without rest. Papers were scattered over the coffee table, and she recognized some as legal contracts. "Elena," he said, standing when she entered. There was no usual casual greeting, no smile, just an intensity that made her stop at the threshold. "What happened?" she asked, though part of her already knew. "I talked to Victoria," Adrian began. "I ended the engagement officially yesterday, but there are complications." Elena put down her cleaning bag, approaching slowly. "Tell me." Adrian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Elena had learned to recognize as his sign of stress. "Doña Beatriz, Victoria's mother, isn't taking the breakup well. She's been making calls, powerful calls. 3 of my main partners received visits from family friends, suggesting it would be prudent to reconsider their investments with me. 2 important contracts that were practically closed got put on indefinite hold. My lawyer says this is just the beginning. She has connections in banking sectors, real estate, government. She can make my professional life very difficult." Elena felt her stomach sink. "Because of me?" "No." Adrian crossed the space between them, taking her hands. "Because of my choice. A choice I would make again, even knowing this. But I need to be honest with you about what this means. Things are going to get difficult, financially, professionally, socially, and you're also going to feel the weight of this." "What do you mean?" Adrian showed her his phone. On the screen was a photo of them both, taken without their knowledge, where she was teaching Adrian a dance step in the hall. The photo was on a society gossip blog with the headline, "Real Estate, Heir Leaves High-Class Fiancé for Domestic Employee." Eleanor felt the color drain from her face. She read the article, full of speculation, half-truths, and characterizations of her that ranged from calculating gold digger to poor naive woman being used. "Oh God," she whispered. "There's more," Adrian continued with a tense voice. "Your cleaning company received a call. Someone, I can't prove it was Beatrice, but I'd bet my fortune it was, suggested they had employees who didn't maintain appropriate professional boundaries. Your supervisor wants to meet with you tomorrow." Eleanor sat heavily on the sofa, the world spinning around her. In the span of 48 hours, her private life had been exposed, her reputation questioned, and her job, her only source of stability, threatened. "Mariana was right," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "I should have listened to her. I should have known this was too good, too impossible." "Elena, no." Adrian knelt in front of her, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me, this is horrible. Yes, it's unfair and cruel, but it's not insurmountable. I can help. I can talk to your boss. I can hire lawyers to handle the defamation." "And prove every point in the article?" Eleanor laughed without humor. "That I'm a cleaner being rescued by the rich man, that I have no agency of my own, that I'm just a helpless victim needing salvation. No, Adrian, If I'm going to survive this, I have to do it on my own. I have to show I have a backbone, that I'm not just the woman behind your decision." "So what do we do?" he asked, and there was desperation in his voice that broke Elena's heart. She took his hands, these hands that had learned to hold her with a tenderness that contradicted his privileged upbringing. "We need time, space. Not to end things," she hurried to add, when she saw panic in his eyes, "but so each of us can handle our own consequences. You need to stabilize your business, deal with the pressures from your circle. I need to handle my job, talk to my family who will now be under scrutiny. We need to prove to ourselves and everyone else that this isn't just an impulsive whim from people who don't understand the real cost." "How long?" "I don't know," Elena admitted. "But Adrian, if there really is something here, something worth building, it needs stronger foundations than secret Wednesdays and stolen conversations. It needs to survive the real world." Adrian closed his eyes, processing. When he opened them again, there was acceptance there, mixed with pain. "You're right, as always. But Elena, I need you to understand something. I'm not backing down, I'm not reconsidering. I'm just giving you the space you need to be sure. Because when we come out the other side of this, and we will, I want it to be, because we both chose this with completely open eyes." They hugged then, in that hall where everything had begun, aware this might be their last moment of closeness for a while. The embrace was different from others they had shared. It wasn't romantic or charged with anticipation, but something deeper. It was two people anchoring each other before the storm really hit. "There's something else you need to know," Adrian said against her hair. "Victoria told me something before we separated, about my mother." Elena pulled back slightly, looking at him with curiosity. What about her? Victoria casually mentioned she had heard stories, that my mother had left a letter for me, kept by my father, a letter I should open when I found my true north. She never mentioned it because she never knew what it meant. But now you think it means this, Elena finished. It means finding something real. "I'm going to open that letter," Adrian decided. "After all these years, I think I'm finally ready for whatever my mother wanted to tell me." They spent their last Wednesday together, not dancing or sharing bread, but talking about practicalities, how they would communicate, which lines they wouldn't cross while navigating this period apart, how they would support each other without compromising the independence they both needed to demonstrate. When Elena finally left, she walked to the bus stop with her head held high. Yes, there were tears in her eyes. Yes, her world was falling apart in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. But there was also something else. Determination. Because if they were going to have any chance, she and Adrian, she needed to prove she was more than just the cleaner who danced. She needed to prove she had the strength to stand on her own, even when the whole world was watching. Mariana exploded in fury when she saw the article. "I warned you," she shouted in their small apartment, waving her phone in the air. "I told you exactly what would happen, but no, you knew better. You thought you could have this fairy tale without consequences." Elena sat on the sofa, too exhausted to fight. "You're right, you were right about everything." The admission seemed to deflate some of Mariana's anger. She sat heavily next to her sister. "Did you lose your job?" "Not yet," Elena responded. "I have a meeting tomorrow. My supervisor was surprisingly neutral. She said she needs to hear my side before making decisions, but I can see in her eyes she's worried about the company's reputation." "And him? Your millionaire prince?" "He's not my prince," Elena corrected firmly. "He's a man who made the mistake of feeling something real in a life that had been carefully constructed to avoid exactly that. Like me." Mariana sighed, some of her hardness softening. "Do you love him?" It was the first time anyone had asked that question directly. Elena considered lying, minimizing, but she was tired of half-truths. "Yes. I know it's absurd. I know it's only been 2 months. I know I'll probably end up heartbroken. But yes, I love him. Not for his money or his status. I care very little about that. I love him because he sees me. He really sees me. And when I'm with him, I see myself differently too. Stronger, more valuable. As if my life isn't just about surviving, but about really living." Mariana took her sister's hand. "Then fight for it. But fight smart, Elena. not like the romantic victim in these stupid stories. Fight like the woman you are, strong, practical, who doesn't need rescue but deserves support. I don't know how to do that, Elena admitted. Well, Mariana smiled for the first time, maybe it's time I tell you something. Remember when I said I worked at one of his properties years ago? Yes. What I didn't tell you is what I discovered there. I was cleaning his office in that country house, an office he rarely uses, and I found documents about an educational fund he established 3 years ago. A fund specifically for families of cleaning and maintenance workers. I was investigating because I'm one of the beneficiaries, Elena. Elena's jaw dropped. What? Those courses I took last year, the ones that got me my job at the law firm, they were paid for by his fund, anonymously. I didn't know until I saw the documents with my name, and it wasn't just me. There were dozens of names. Entire families receiving help for education, training, opportunities, and all done quietly, without publicity, without seeking credit. Elena felt tears beginning to form. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was angry, Mariana admitted. Angry that some rich person thought they could help people like us. It felt like charity, like we were projects. But then I saw you with him, saw how he looked at you, and I understood something. It's not charity for him. It's a way of honoring something, maybe the memory of someone. Maybe his mother, who also came from our world. His mother, Eleanor whispered, remembering Adrian's words about the sealed letter. There's more, Mariana continued. In the documents there was correspondence with the lawyer. It mentioned a letter from his mother, instructions about how to manage the fund. And it mentioned something specific, that the fund should continue until he found his true north. And then it should expand, become something bigger, as if his mother knew he would be lost for a while, but would eventually find his way. Eleanor processed this information, the pieces falling into place. Where are these documents? At my work, Mariana hesitated. Elena, what I'm going to suggest is a bit unethical, but if you really need something to give you strength in your meeting tomorrow, something that shows this isn't just a superficial affair. No, Elena interrupted firmly. I'm not going to use Adrian's private information to defend myself. That would betray exactly the trust we've built. I face this with the truth of who I am, not with stolen secrets about who he is. Mariana looked at her with new admiration. Okay, then we'll do this your way, but Elena, you need a plan, because tomorrow, when you walk into that office, it's going to be your moment to prove who you really are. They spent the rest of the night preparing. Mariana, with her experience at the law firm, helped Elena formulate exactly what to say, how to present her case without sounding defensive or apologizing for feeling what she felt. Don Carlos listened from his armchair, his eyes closed but clearly awake. When Mariana finally went to sleep, he called to Elena. Mija, come here. Elena sat at his feet, like when she was a child, and he told her stories from the village. Tomorrow, he said slowly, you're going to face judgment. Not in a court, but judgment nonetheless. And I want you to remember something your mother once told me when her family was pressuring her to leave me. She told me, Carlos, people can judge me all they want. They can call me foolish, naive, a dreamer. But at the end of the day, I'm the one who has to live my life, and I'd rather live it with integrity and love, even if it's difficult, than live it with comfort and regret. Sounds like her, Elena said softly. That's what I want you to understand, Mija. You're not defending a forbidden relationship. You're defending your right to choose a life that's yours. Whether that man is part of that life or not, that's your decision. No one else has the right to make it for you. Thank you, Papa. But also remember this, Don Carlos added, opening his eyes to look at her directly. Courage without wisdom is just recklessness. Make sure what you're fighting for is really worth what you're risking, because once you cross certain bridges and burn them behind you, there's no going back. Elena nodded, understanding the weight of his words. That night, lying in the darkness, she checked her messages. Adrian had sent one. I opened my mother's letter. I need to tell you what it said, but I'll wait until you're ready to hear it. I know your meeting is tomorrow. I'm with you, even though I can't be there physically. You're the bravest person I know. Elena responded simply, Tell me about the letter when we see each other again. I have a feeling I'm going to need to hear what your mother had to say. Good night, Adrian. Elena smiled in the darkness, feeling something in her chest loosen. Tomorrow would be difficult. It would probably be one of the hardest days of her life, but at least she would know she faced it being completely herself, without apologizing for feeling what she felt, or for daring to imagine a life bigger than the limits others had drawn for her. And that, she decided as she fell asleep, was a kind of victory in itself. The cleaning company office was a small, efficient space in an unpretentious commercial building. Eleanor had been there dozens of times to pick up her pay or discuss new assignments, but she had never felt as small as when she entered that morning and saw her supervisor, Mrs. Rodriguez, waiting for her with an indecipherable expression. "Elena, sit down," the older woman said, pointing to a chair in front of her metal desk. Elena sat, keeping her back straight, remembering her father's words about dignity. Mrs. Rodriguez opened a folder containing copies of the gossip article, Elena's work records, and what appeared to be notes from phone calls. "I'm going to be direct with you," the supervisor began. "We received 3 calls this week, one from an anonymous source, suggesting we had employees inappropriately involved with clients, another from a lawyer representing the Santillana family asking about our professional conduct policies, and a third from Mr. Mendoza himself, offering to provide us with an exceptionally positive reference letter about your work." Elena felt her stomach sink, but kept her expression neutral. "I understand. Do you understand?" Mrs. Rodriguez closed the folder. "Elena, you've worked for us for 6 years. Always punctual, always professional, never a single complaint from a client. Your houses are the most impeccable, your tips are the highest. You are objectively one of my best employees. So before I make any decision, I want to hear your side, directly from you." Eleanor took a deep breath. "I met Mr. Mendoza 2 months ago when I was assigned to his property. Our interactions began professionally, but over time, we developed a connection. I didn't violate any company policy. I never neglected my work, never stole company time, never compromised the quality of my service. What happened between us occurred during my working hours, yes, but it didn't interfere with my responsibilities." "But you developed romantic feelings for a client," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "Yes," Elena admitted, "and he for me. That wasn't planned, wasn't calculated, it simply happened, and when we realized it was happening, he ended his engagement with another person because he didn't want to live a lie. I understand this is complicated, that it seems inappropriate from the outside. But I didn't do anything dishonest. I wasn't a gold digger or whatever that article calls me. I was just a woman who made the mistake of feeling something real in a complicated context." Mrs. Rodriguez studied her for a long moment. "You know what bothers me most about this situation, Elena?" "No, ma'am." "That I have to consider firing you, not because you did something wrong, but because powerful people are applying pressure. That's what really bothers me. You've been an exemplary employee, but now I have to choose between keeping my best worker or keeping rich clients happy, and that's fundamentally unfair." Elena felt tears stinging her eyes, but kept them controlled. "I understand the position this puts you in, Mrs. Rodriguez. If you need to fire me to protect the company, I understand. I don't blame you." "I didn't say I was going to fire you," the supervisor corrected. "I said I'm bothered by having to consider it. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to transfer you to a new territory, as was already planned, but I'm going to do something else. I'm going to promote you to area supervisor, more responsibility, better pay, a position that requires leadership skills and judgment you've consistently demonstrated. This does 2 things. First, it physically removes you from the situation that's causing controversy. Second, it demonstrates that this company values its employees based on merit, not external pressures." Eleanor blinked, stunned. "What?" "Listen to me well." Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward. "I'm not doing this just for you. I'm doing it because if I give in to this type of pressure now, I set a dangerous precedent. Next time some rich family decides one of my employees is inconvenient for some reason, what, I just fire her? No. I run a business based on integrity, and that means protecting my people when they haven't done anything wrong." "Mrs. Rodriguez, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet," the older woman smiled slightly. "But Eleanor, I'm going to give you advice woman to woman. This man, this Adrian Mendoza, he seems to be someone decent if he's willing to face all this for you. But make sure you're not sacrificing your own identity in the process. A promotion, more money, better position, those things are yours. You earned them. Don't let anyone, not even someone you love, make you feel your value comes from them. I won't, Elena promised. That's exactly what I'm fighting for, the right to be valuable on my own. Good. Mrs. Rodriguez stood, extending her hand. Then, Supervisor Morales, welcome to your new position. You start Monday. Elena shook the woman's hand, feeling as if a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had entered that office expecting to lose everything, and she was leaving with more than she had before. When she exited the building, the midday sun was bright and warm. She took out her phone and called Adrian. He answered on the first ring. Elena, how did it go? They promoted me, she said, and heard his relieved laughter on the other end of the line. That's incredible, but not surprising. You're exceptional at what you do. Adrian, about your mother's letter, Elena said, walking toward a small nearby park. I'm ready to hear it. What did it say? There was a pause, and when Adrian spoke, his voice was charged with emotion. It said many things, about how she lost herself when she married my father, how money changed who they were as a family. But there was one specific part. Can I read it to you? Please. Elena heard the sound of paper being unfolded, and then Adrian's voice reading. Elena sat on a park bench, tears flowing freely now. She knew, she whispered. Your mother knew exactly what you would need to hear. Yes, Adrian agreed. And Elena, that's exactly what I want to do. I don't want you to give up your world for mine, or for me to give up mine for yours. I want us to build bridges. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Elena smiled through her tears. So that's what we'll do. Does this mean... It means that when we're ready, when we've handled our own storms and proven we can stand independently, we can start building something together. Not a fairy tale where you rescue me or where I redeem you. Just two people building something real, with all its flaws and complications. Can I see you? Adrian asked. Not at the mansion, not hidden. I want to take you to dinner, to a public place. I want the world to see I'm not hiding you, that I'm not ashamed, that I'm proud to be with you. Elena considered. Part of her still feared the exposure, the judgment, but a stronger part, the part that had just faced her supervisor with honesty and dignity, wanted exactly that. Yes, she finally said, but not to a fancy place where I'll feel out of place, somewhere in between, a place where we can both be ourselves. I know exactly the place, Adrian responded. Tomorrow night? Tomorrow night, Elena agreed. When they hung up, Elena stayed on that park bench for a long time, watching children play and couples walk hand in hand. She had faced her greatest fear and come out the other side, not just intact, but stronger. And for the first time since all this began, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks, real hope. Not the naive hope that everything would be easy, but the mature hope of knowing that when things were difficult, she had the strength to face them. Her phone rang with a message from Mariana. Papa told me. Congratulations, Supervisor Morales. I told you you were stronger than you thought. Now go and build that life you deserve. Elena smiled, writing back. Only because I have the right people reminding me who I am. I love you. And as she walked back toward her apartment, Elena realized this was the real transformation. Not becoming someone different, but becoming more completely herself, with all the courage and authenticity she had always possessed, but had been too afraid to fully claim. The road ahead was still full of challenges, but now she knew with absolute certainty that she had what it took to walk it. The restaurant Adrian chose was neither too elegant nor too casual. It was a family establishment, known for its honest food and welcoming atmosphere. When Elena arrived, wearing a simple but pretty dress that Mariana insisted on lending her, she saw Adrian waiting outside, visibly nervous. You look beautiful, he said when she approached, and the way he said it, with genuine admiration, without affectation, made her feel exactly that. You look good too, Elena responded, noticing he wore jeans and a button-down shirt, not the usual formal suit. It was a small but significant gesture. He was also stepping out of his comfort zone. Dinner was complicated, not because anything went wrong, but because they were both hyper-aware of the looks they received. Some people recognized them from the article. There were whispers, some disapproving looks, but also some understanding smiles. "How do you handle this?" Elena asked midway through dinner. "The constant scrutiny, people always judging." "Honestly," Adrian cut his food thoughtfully, "I never cared before because I was always playing a role. The successful business heir, the appropriate fiancé. When you're playing a role, judgment feels directed at the character, not at you. But this, with you, is real. So yes, I care. But not enough to stop me." An older woman approached their table, and Elena automatically tensed, but the woman simply smiled warmly. "Excuse me for interrupting," she said, "but I just wanted to say, I saw that terrible article about you two, and I wanted you to know that not everyone thinks that way. Some of us remember what it's like to choose love over convenience. I wish you the best." She walked away before they could respond, leaving them momentarily speechless. "That was unexpected," Eleanor murmured. "People can surprise you," Adrian said, "sometimes positively." After dinner, they walked through downtown, no particular destination, simply enjoying being together without hiding. "Tell me about your promotion," Adrian said. "What does it involve exactly?" Elena lit up as she explained her new responsibilities, the leadership opportunities, how she could finally implement some ideas she'd had about improving working conditions for cleaners. "You sound passionate," Adrian observed. "I am," Eleanor admitted. "For the first time, I feel like I can make a real difference, not just for me, but for other women like me. My mother would have been proud." "I'm sure she is," Adrian said softly. They found a bench overlooking a small plaza where street musicians were playing. They sat, not touching but close, and for a moment simply existed in that quiet space. "Adrian," Elena began, "I need to ask you something difficult." "Anything." "What if this doesn't work?" The words came out in a rush. "Not the relationship, we'll figure that out, but the rest. What if your business really collapses because of this? What if you lose everything you worked to build? Could you live with that, or would you eventually blame me?" Adrian turned his body completely toward her. "I've thought a lot about that. And here's the truth. Yes, I might lose contracts, yes, some doors might close, but, Elena, I was already losing something much more important. I was losing my humanity. I was becoming exactly the type of person my mother warned against. Rich but empty, successful but joyless. If I have to rebuild my business in a different way, with different values, then that's what I'll do. And no, I would never blame you. Because you didn't cause this situation, you woke me up to it. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person," Elena said softly. "I'm not putting pressure on you," Adrian corrected. "You're not responsible for my awakening or my happiness. That's my job. But Elena, you showed me that another path was possible. That's a gift, not a burden." Elena nodded slowly, processing. "My father wants to meet you," she finally said. "Properly. Not as the secret boss, but as the man I'm interested in. Mariana, too, though she'll probably interrogate you like you're a criminal." "I'd love to meet them," Adrian responded immediately. "When?" "Sunday lunch at our apartment. And Adrian, it's small, humble. Nothing like what you're used to." "Well," he smiled, "then it will be perfect for starting to learn how your world works." That night, when Adrian drove her home, he didn't try to kiss her. Instead, he took her hand and held it for a moment. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me a chance, for being patient while I figure out how to do this right." "Thank you," Elena responded, "for being willing to be more than just the role you were playing. That takes more courage than anything." Sunday arrived with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Elena had cleaned the apartment until it shone, Mariana had prepared traditional food, and Don Carlos had put on his best shirt, the one he reserved for important occasions. When the doorbell rang, all three froze for a moment. Then Eleanor took a deep breath and opened the door. Adrian was there, but not the Adrian of expensive suits and business manners. He wore simple clothes almost identical to what he had worn on their date, and in his hands he had not expensive flowers or extravagant gifts, but a simple bottle of wine from a local winery and freshly baked bread. "I hope this is okay," he said, almost shy. "Elena mentioned your family likes homemade bread, and I thought—" "It's perfect," Elena said, letting him in. Lunch began tense. Don Carlos watched Adrian with the intensity of someone evaluating whether this man was worthy of his daughter. Mariana asked pointed questions disguised as casual conversation. Elena played with her food, too nervous to eat. But something changed when Adrian, instead of trying to impress with stories of business success, asked Don Carlos about his life as a farmer, and when the old man began to talk about the cycles of seasons, about the connection with the earth, about the knowledge that comes from decades of observing and learning, Adrian listened with genuine attention. "My mother grew up in a farming village," Adrian shared. "When I was a child, she used to tell me about it. But when my father succeeded, she stopped talking about it, as if it was something to be ashamed of. Now I realize she probably missed that world terribly." Don Carlos nodded slowly. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman who made an understandable mistake. The world told her her past had no value, so she hid it. But that must have been like cutting out part of her soul." "Exactly," Adrian leaned forward. "That's why, Don Carlos, I want you to know I'm not here to take Elena away from her world. I'm here because I want to learn about it, be part of it somehow. Your daughter is teaching me not just to dance, but to see value in things my education taught me to ignore." "Pretty words," Don Carlos said. "But words are easy. What I want to know is, when things get tough, and they will get tough, will you run back to your safe world? Or will you stay and fight for what you say you value?" "I've already lost 3 important contracts," Adrian responded honestly. 2 partners have expressed concerns. My bank account looks different than it did a month ago. And you know what, Don Carlos? I care less than ever before. Not because money doesn't matter. I know it matters, especially for people who don't have enough, but because I finally understand there are things money can't buy, and that once you lose them, no amount of wealth can recover them. "And my daughter," Don Carlos pressed. "What is your intention with her?" "My intention," Adrian looked directly into the older man's eyes, "is to know her really and completely. It's to respect her enough not to rush anything, to let this grow at its own pace. It's to support her dreams and ambitions without trying to control or shape them. And eventually, if she wants, it's to build a life together that honors both where we come from and where we're going." The silence that followed was heavy. Then Don Carlos did something unexpected. He smiled. "Good answer," he said. "Now the real question. Can you dance?" Elena and Mariana exchanged surprised looks. "A little," Adrian admitted. "Elena has been teaching me." "Show me," Don Carlos ordered. "Mariana, put on music from the Harvest Festival." What followed was simultaneously beautiful and comical. Adrian, clearly out of his element, tried to recreate the steps Elena had taught him. He stumbled, lost the rhythm, stepped on Elena's foot. But he continued, laughing at himself, letting Elena guide him. Don Carlos watched with critical eyes that gradually softened. "It's not natural for you," he commented when the music ended. "But you try. And that trying, that willingness to look foolish for something that matters to my daughter, that says more than any pretty words." The rest of lunch flowed more smoothly. They shared stories, laughed, and slowly Adrian began to see not just Elena, but the entire network of love and connection that had formed her. When it was time to leave, Don Carlos walked Adrian to the door. "One last thing," the old man said. "Elena is stronger than she appears, but she also has a heart bigger than her common sense sometimes. If you hurt her, if you fail her when she needs you there, I won't care how much money you have or how many lawyers you can hire. Do you understand me?" "Completely," Adrian responded. "And Don Carlos, if I ever do that, if I ever fail her when she needs me most, you'll have every right to remind me of this moment." "Good," Don Carlos extended his hand. "Then you have my blessing. Use it wisely." The handshake was firm, a seal on something important. After Adrian left, Elena hugged her father. "Thank you, Papa." "Don't thank me yet," Don Carlos said. "He still has to prove he can keep his promises. But Mija, I think he'll really try. And sometimes that's all we can ask. Someone who's willing to try." That night, Adrian sent a message. "Your father reminded me what's at stake. He also reminded me why it's worth it. Thank you for letting me into your world. It's more beautiful than I imagined." Elena responded, "You survived Don Carlos's interrogation. That means you're braver than I thought. Or more foolish, I'm still deciding which." Elena smiled, feeling something in her chest expand and soften at the same time. There were still challenges ahead. The social storms hadn't passed, professional obstacles still existed, but they had crossed an important threshold. The people who mattered most in their respective lives now knew each other. The bridges were beginning to be built. And as Elena prepared for sleep that night, she realized that for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel fear. She felt hope, the robust, realistic hope of knowing she was building something real on solid foundations, with someone willing to do the difficult work necessary to make it work. The future was still uncertain, but now they would face it together, with families who, though cautious, were willing to give them a chance. And that, Elena decided, was more than many people had. 2 weeks later, Adrian received the call he had been expecting and dreading. It was his main partner, Roberto Salazar, a man with whom he had built his business empire over the last decade. "Adrian, we need to talk. In person. It's important." They met at the company's main office, a space Adrian had personally designed years ago. But now it felt different, cold, impersonal, as if it belonged to a life that was no longer his. Roberto didn't waste time on preliminaries. "The other partners and I have been discussing the situation. The pressures we've faced since your change in personal circumstances. And we've reached a decision." Adrian braced himself. "We're offering you an out," Roberto continued. "We'll buy your share in the company at fair market price. It will free you from ongoing scrutiny, allow you to start fresh. It's a generous offer given the circumstances." "Or," Adrian said slowly, "what? If I refuse, you'll force me out anyway?" Roberto had the decency to look uncomfortable. "There are clauses in our partnership agreement about behavior that damages the company's reputation. Doña Beatriz has made it clear she'll continue pressuring our clients and partners while you're associated with us. This isn't personal, Adrian, it's business." "It's absolutely personal," Adrian corrected. "And Roberto, I understand the position you're in, I really do. But let me ask you something. What kind of company did we build if we let one vindictive woman dictate our business decisions? What kind of values are we demonstrating?" "Values that keep us in business," Roberto responded. "Look, Adrian, I don't judge your personal choices. If you want to be with the cleaner, that's your decision. But you can't expect the rest of us to pay the price for it." The word cleaner, said with that tone, as if it were something dirty, something less than, made something in Adrian solidify. "Her name is Elena, and she's not the cleaner, she's an area supervisor now, earned that promotion on merit. But you know what's more important than her title? She's a person of integrity, something I'm discovering is rarer in our circles than I'd like to admit." "So what are you going to do?" Roberto asked. "Reject the offer? Force us all through a prolonged legal battle no one will win?" Adrian stood, walking to the window overlooking the city. "I'm going to accept your offer," he finally said. "But not because you're forcing me, because you've made it clear that my values no longer align with this company. My mother left an educational fund, one you didn't even know existed, because she and I did it discreetly, without seeking credit or tax advantage. I'm going to take that money from the sale and expand that fund. I'm going to build something new, something that matters in ways beyond quarterly profits." "You're making a mistake," Roberto said. "Probably," Adrian agreed, "but it's my mistake to make. And Roberto, someday when you're in your empty mansion counting your money, I hope you remember this moment. I hope you wonder if the choices you made really made you happy or just made you rich." He walked out of that office feeling lighter than he had in years. Yes, he had just given up millions. Yes, he was leaving behind a decade of work. But he was also leaving behind the chains of expectations and appearances that had been slowly suffocating him. He drove directly to Elena's new work territory. He found her in a large house, training a new employee on proper cleaning techniques. Seeing Elena in this role, confident, competent, teaching with patience and respect, made his chest expand with something he could barely name. He waited until she finished, then approached. "Can I steal a few minutes?" Elena looked at her new employee. "Take a break. I'll be back soon." They walked to a small nearby cafe. "You just quit your company," Elena said without preamble. "I can see it in your face." "How?" "I know you now," she smiled. "Are you okay?" "I'm scared," Adrian admitted. "I've never been without that safety net. I've never had to rebuild from almost nothing. But Elena, I also feel free for the first time in, I don't know how long. What will you do now?" "Expand my mother's fund. Work with communities like yours. Build something that helps people improve their lives without having to give up their identities. And honestly, I'm still figuring out the details. But I know it will be something that matters in ways my previous work never did." Elena took his hand across the table. "You're going to need people with experience in working communities, people who understand real needs, not just perceptions from above." "Are you volunteering?" "Maybe," Elena smiled, "if there's room for a cleaning supervisor in your new world." "There's always room for you," Adrian said softly, "in any capacity you want. Partner, consultant, or simply the person who keeps me honest when I start losing sight of what really matters." "I like the sound of that last one," Elena said. "Someone has to keep you grounded." They looked at each other for a long moment, and something passed between them. Not just romantic attraction, though that was there, but a deeper recognition. They had weathered the storm, not unscathed, but together, and now they were ready to start building something new. "What happened to not being my savior?" Adrian asked, remembering her earlier words. "You're not my savior," Elena corrected. "You're my partner. There's a difference. Saviors come with all the answers and expect gratitude. Partners bring their own strengths and vulnerabilities and build something together." "Partners, then." Adrian extended his hand formally, his eyes dancing with humor. "Partners." Elena shook his hand, and then, impulsively, leaned in and kissed him softly. It was their first real kiss, not stolen in secret or hidden in private corners, but in the middle of a public cafe where anyone could see. And they didn't care. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "The world is still going to be difficult," Elena warned. "People are still going to judge." "I know," Adrian said. "But now we have something we didn't have before. The truth. No more secrets. No more hiding. Just us, building something real, one day at a time." "I can live with that," Elena said, and as they left the cafe together, hand in hand, toward a future that was uncertain but full of possibility, both knew they had made the right choice. Not the easy choice, but the right one. Because sometimes love isn't about grand romantic gestures or living happily ever after without effort. Sometimes it's about two people choosing to face life together, with all its complexity and challenge, because the alternative, living halfway, hiding who they really are, is a slow death of the soul. And neither Adrian nor Elena was willing to die that way, not anymore. 6 months later, the community center in Elena's hometown was filled with life. It wasn't luxurious. The walls needed paint, the chairs were mismatched, the sound system occasionally crackled, but it was filled with something no money could buy: authentic community. It was the annual Harvest Festival celebration, the same festival Elena had described to Adrian months ago, in a mansion that was now being sold. But this time, Adrian wasn't a curious visitor or a stranger looking in from outside. He was simply part of the celebration. Don Carlos sat in a chair of honor, his eyes bright as he watched his two daughters, Elena and Mariana, dance with the same joy they'd had as girls. Adrian was with a group of farmers, listening to stories about harvests and seasons, contributing where he could with knowledge about resource management and financial planning that, surprisingly, translated well to the agricultural context. The Isabel Mendoza Educational Fund had grown significantly. With the money from the company sale and the new structures Adrian had implemented, it now provided not only scholarships but vocational training, microloans for community entrepreneurs, and mentorship programs. Elena was the program director, using her first-hand experience to design interventions that actually worked. Victoria, surprisingly, had attended the celebration with Rafael, her tennis instructor who was now her fiancé. They had caused their own social scandal months ago, but unlike Doña Beatriz, who still refused to speak to her daughter, Victoria seemed happier than anyone had seen her. "It's different here," Victoria commented to Adrian as they watched the dancing. "More real. People laugh because they're genuinely happy, not because it's socially appropriate." "Yes," Adrian agreed. "It took me a while to understand it, but this is the world my mother came from, the world she missed. Now I understand why." The music changed to a slow, traditional song, the same one Elena had been listening to that first day when she danced alone in the mansion. Adrian saw her from across the hall, their eyes meeting, and without words, both moved toward the center. This time when they danced, Adrian didn't stumble. He had practiced, not just the steps, but understanding the meaning behind each movement. Elena guided him gently when needed, but mostly they simply danced together, two people moving in perfect synchrony. "Do you remember the first day?" Elena murmured. "When I thought I was alone." "You were never alone," Adrian responded. "I was there, though you didn't know it yet, watching someone so genuine, so free, that it made me realize how much I had sacrificed to fit into a world that was never really mine." "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked. "Everything you gave up." Adrian spun her gently, the movement now natural and fluid. "Sometimes I miss the financial security," he admitted honestly. "The knowing I don't have to worry about money. But regret this? Regret you, this life, finally living according to my own values? Never." "Good," Elena smiled, "because Mariana and I are pregnant. Both of us." Adrian stopped abruptly, almost stepping on her. "What?" Elena laughed. "I'm kidding. I just wanted to see your reaction. But someday, maybe—" "Maybe," Adrian agreed, beginning to dance again, his heart still racing. "When we're ready, when we've built something solid enough that children can grow up seeing that love and mutual respect are more important than money or status." The song ended, but they kept dancing as the next one began. Around them the community celebrated, not out of social obligation or appearances, but from pure joy of being alive, of being together, of honoring traditions that connected the past with the present. Don Carlos, watching his daughter with the man she had chosen, felt something loosen in his chest. It was approval, yes, but also relief. Elena had found what his wife had found with him, true love, complicated and real, built on mutual respect rather than convenience or fantasy. As the night continued, Adrian found a moment to speak with Don Carlos. "I want to ask you something," Adrian said nervously. "If it's what I think it is," Don Carlos responded, "you already have my answer. But ask anyway. She deserves to hear the words." "I'm ready," Adrian said. "I finally know who I am, outside of others' expectations. I have work that matters, a community that accepts me, and a life that feels authentic. And I want to build the rest of that life with Elena. Not because she completes me, we're both complete people on our own, but because together we can build something even more beautiful than what either of us could create alone." Don Carlos nodded slowly. "You've learned well, son. Keep learning. Marriage is a commitment to keep growing together, to challenge each other to be better while accepting each other as you are. Can you do that?" "With all my heart," Adrian promised. "Then talk to my daughter, but do it your way, not the way you think it should be done. Make it genuine." Later that night, when the celebration was beginning to wind down, Adrian took Elena to a quiet spot under the stars. "We danced here the first time I came to the village," he remembered, "when I was still figuring out what all this meant, what you meant to me." "And now?" Elena asked, looking up at the familiar constellations. "Now I know." Adrian took her hands. "I know I want all the Wednesdays, not just the stolen ones. I want the mornings and the evenings, the good days and the difficult ones. I want to build the Isabel Fund with you, raise children eventually, grow old arguing about the best way to help communities while we dance in our kitchen. Elena Morales, will you marry me?" There was no ring. Elena had once mentioned she would prefer something simple, made by local artisans when the moment came. But there was love in his eyes, promise in his voice, and certainty in his heart. Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, because you see me too. You see me when I dance alone thinking no one is watching. You see me when I doubt myself. You see me when I'm strong. And you built bridges between our worlds without asking me to give up mine. So yes, Adrian Mendoza, let's build the rest of our lives together." They kissed under the stars, and it was different from any kiss before. It was a promise, a commitment, the seal of something they had been carefully building for months. When they returned to the celebration hand in hand, Don Carlos already knew. He could see it in their faces. Mariana screamed with joy, hugging her sister. The community surrounded them with congratulations and blessings. Victoria and Rafael approached, smiling genuinely. "Congratulations," Victoria said. "You two did it. You built something real from something everyone said was impossible." "You too," Elena responded generously. "Rafael, take care of her." "Every day," Rafael promised, squeezing Victoria's hand. The celebration continued until dawn, and as the sun began to rise over the mountains, Adrian and Elena stood together, looking toward the new day. "Ready?" Elena asked. "For what?" "For everything," she smiled. "Marriage, building the fund, inevitable challenges, eventually children who will drive us crazy, growing old together while we dance in kitchens and argue about community finances." "More than ready," Adrian pulled her close. "But Elena, there's one more thing I need to say." "What?" "Thank you," he said simply, "for dancing that day, for not hiding or apologizing for who you are. Because if you hadn't, if you had been anyone less than your complete, authentic self, I never would have woken up. You saved my life without even knowing it." "I didn't save you," Elena corrected gently. "I showed you the mirror, the hard work of changing, of growing, of choosing a different life. You did that. Then we did this together," Adrian concluded. "Together," Elena agreed. And as the sun rose fully, bathing them in golden light, they began to dance once more. Not in an empty hall where no one was watching, but surrounded by community, family, and the love they had chosen against all odds. Because in the end, that was the real lesson they had both learned. Love wasn't about easy choices or inevitable destiny. It was about two people choosing day after day to build something together. It was about honoring where you come from while creating where you're going. It was about dancing, not just when you thought no one was watching, but especially when everyone was watching, because your joy, your authenticity, your love weren't things to be ashamed of, but things to celebrate. And as they danced into their new future, both knew they had found exactly what they had been searching for without even knowing it. A home, not in a place, but in another person who saw your true soul and loved it without reservation.